Here we go. Welcome back to Shallow and Pedantic. Patreon.com/Shallow Pedantic. That's where all the good stuff is. All the updates on contentblues.com. I'm Andrew, joined here as always by Mike and Kieran. And boys, this time you got to assign the homework, didn't you?
Yes.
We did.
And this was much more pleasant homework, I'm going to admit.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, this time around we're doing The Last Unicorn
The Last Unicorn, which was a book
by Peter S. Beagle.
who also wrote the screenplay.
Yes.
Yep.
I have also read the Wikipedia.
We just looked at the special features on the DVD.
Oh, did you? I found it on Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime, like for free to view.
Ah, nice.
So I watched it last night with my daughters.
Excellent.
It was, I don't think, I have to admit here, like, I never think I've ever actually watched a Rankin-Bass film before this. Well, actually, that's not true. I have seen Return of the King, but I saw it when I was a little boy. And, like, it was years before I even actually read Tolkien. I watched that. It was on TV or something. And my dad said, you should watch this. And I said, okay, I will. And all I remember is the guy singing the song about Frodo of the Nine Fingers and the Ring of Doom.
And the Ring of Doom. Mm-hmm.
And it's right here in my head, and I can hear it like I heard it for the first time just now. So I never actually watched The Hobbit. Which I feel like I should rectify after watching The Last Unicorn.
You should. The Hobbit's real. It's the high water mark that when Peter Jackson did his movies, that's what everyone's pretty much measured. Not the Hobbit movies, but the actual original Lord of the Rings. That's what people are measuring it against. Like, will they get it as faithfully as like the Hobbit cartoon did?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I remember liking the Return of the King, but like I said, I saw it when I was a little boy, and throughout my life, I always associated Rankin-Bass with Thundercats.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because they did the animation for that, which is one of the things I think that made Thundercats unique was its animation style, because they didn't do a lot of TV shows, did they? Rankin-Bass?
No,
I think that might have been the only one.
Yeah, I think it was just Thundercats.
A lot of holiday shit, like they did all the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Santa Claus is Coming to Town and Frosty the Snowman. They did, the Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings. They did, Last Unicorn, The Flight of Dragons, and Thundercats. I don't know if they did Silverhawks or not, but they definitely did Thundercats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they did the Silverhawks. I feel like by the time they were doing TV, they had more or less closed the book on doing feature-length films.
Yeah.
And I mean, I thought The Last Unicorn was actually a good choice for us because it's sort of the golden era of when Rankin-Bass was doing animated films. It's sort of like right smack in the middle of when this was like an enterprise for them.
Yeah, this is 1982. This may have been one of their last things that they did. I tell you, watching it's hard not to love the visuals and the art style of it.
Yeah.
Even though it does many things that I incredibly dislike. Like, it has anime skinny legs. Everybody has skinny legs, and that I've always found that irritating. And I think I tried to watch this like 10 years ago and only caught like somebody put it on at a party because it was that kind of a party, and I was already kind of like halfway out the door, and then I watched like the first half hour of it, and I did not connect with it.
Sure.
And then I left, and sitting there watching it, I both loved and hated it. It was a very interesting story. It was very cleverly told. All the characters are interesting, and the voice acting is great. I think I just wanted fewer songs.
Oh yeah.
I
think I wanted fewer songs.
I was looking over at Mike when we were watching. Like, I paused it for a second. Motherfucker, I don't remember there being this much goddamn singing in it, and it's not even.
Well, and we commented on this when we were rewatching it yesterday, and I was like, yeah, so the first like half to 2/3 of this movie sort of lulls you into a false sense of security because there's not that many songs, and this is from like the early 80s where like
Right.
singing is part of like children's movies and like entertainment and all of that. And then they get to the castle and they do like 4 or 5 songs, and I was like, really?
Right. Like there's one like there's a song and there's like a 2-minute interval and then another song. And I think that's what broke me. I think I couldn't take it. And it's the love song between Lear and Amalthea, and I was like,
Yeah, it's horrible. Like, Jeff Bridges, please stop singing. Oh God.
Like, I'm not even sure it's actually him singing. I don't like. It's definitely Mia Farrow singing, but like, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just God, yeah, the singing fucking killed me. It's like one of those movies that that's got a pseudo contemporary soundtrack to a fantasy storyline. Sometimes that works. Like, it worked in Legend. It worked in Legend with the soundtrack by Tangerine Dream.
I have not seen Legend in forever.
But it did not work in Lady Hawk.
No.
It's a bunch of synth pop bullshit.
I don't think I've actually seen Lady Hawk. I've seen like bits and pieces of it, but I've never seen it.
It is a good film, but the soundtrack weighs it the fuck down. Like, you could go back and throw in some generic medieval music and it'd be fucking great.
Well, there's a cut where somebody basically literally took Lady Hawk and just replaced the synth pop with like strings essentially, and it's a very different film.
Yeah.
I feel that this movie would have also benefit from that. The band that they got, like a band called America, which followed that horrible early 80s, late 70s trend of bands being named after geographical location, which should never happen again, because you almost never ended up with any good songs out of them.
Yeah, America's big hit was Horse with No Name.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was from 1971.
Yeah,
that's how long they'd been around, and they're called. My parents had their like greatest hits album, and my dad loved joking at the fact they're called America, but they're all from England.
Yeah, and it was interesting that they had America for the soundtrack, and then when they did when Rankin-Bass did the Flight of Dragons, they had Don McLean, the guy that did The Day the Music Died.
Another hit song from 1971, yeah.
Yeah, he was the guy that he just did the title track for The Flight of Dragons, but otherwise, that particular Rankin-Bass movie just had like a score.
Yeah.
And there was no, and it was a children's movie, but there were no musical numbers, which I thought was a very interesting, sort of juxtaposition.
This would have benefited from just a score, because I really feel the singing takes away from a lot of the layered things going on in the background of the story at that point.
Yeah, I'd agree.
There's a lot. There's a lot going on in this story. There's many unanswered questions, but I feel these unanswered questions just kind of lend to the mystique.
Yeah, they don't bother explaining and nailing down every last thing. Like, you're not going to get an explanation of why King Haggard has the Red Bull.
Right. Or how he came to get the Red Bull. Yeah.
Or you can infer that it was that other magician that hooked him up, the one that, like, Schmendrick replaces. But that's an inference. Nothing says that. And honestly, the story doesn't feel like it needs that. It works as just a fairy tale in which a king has a Red Bull. It's magic. It's magic. It's just magic. Just roll with it. It's magic. There's almost no world building.
No.
And the story manages to connect anyway because, I think, the vocal performances are strong enough. And it's just a weird little story.
Yeah. It's
a weird little story with really bright and interesting characters.
Yeah, like the whole thing. One of the things. So should we take this from beginning to end? Because there's a lot of elements of this that are very interesting. I think we can break down here, but
We should do that, but first, Mike, what were you going to say?
yeah.
Because I cut him off, and then you cut him off.
Well, I was going to say we were talking about the musical numbers, and we were saying that sections of the soundtrack essentially could have just been replaced by a score, and part of the reason I agree with that is there are actually at least 2 or 3 times in this movie, I haven't counted, but I noticed at least 2 of them yesterday, where they're essentially doing a musical number at the same time that they have a montage.
Yes.
So I'm kind of like, well, you can still have a montage and just like play the score, or have a shorter montage and use the score. Like, there's a lot of that stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I thought that was an interesting pairing, and I was like, well, yeah, but if you just cut down on the musical numbers, you would actually significantly cut down on the runtime of this film.
And if you've got access to the London Symphony Orchestra, and they do, because there are scored pieces by the London Symphony Orchestra, like, why not just use that? What do you need America for? Like, you can use them for the title number, because the title number kind of pops. I'm okay with it, but yeah, it's kind of a weird choice. I guess it feels obligatory.
Not sure.
I don't know. It's like, we got to have songs. How are they going to know what the emotions are if we don't have songs?
I was talking this over with a friend of mine, and she was like, well, that part of the reason there are all of these annoying children's songs, like in movies and TV shows and films and all of that, is like, that's how kids learn. And I was like, I did not know that. That makes sense. Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like, so, okay, I could see that. All right, I was not aware of this, but, thinking back to my own childhood, I'm like, crap, you're right. Yeah.
It makes me think of when my daughter was in, like, kindergarten or something, and, like, for, like, parent-teacher night, the kindergarten teacher, or maybe this is a preschool teacher, I think it was preschool, actually, said, all right, parents, would you like to see something amazing? And she played the cleanup song, and all of a sudden, these kids just, like, snapped, and were just like, now it's time to clean up. We're going to clean up all our toys, because that's what we do when the song plays. And all the parents were like, what wizardry is this? You can tell them to clean up their rooms, but if you play the song, then they'll actually do it.
Well, parents are like, hey, can I get a copy of that?
Yeah, I'm going to need that cleanup song. I think we found it on YouTube once, and it did not have the same effect, because they were like, this is for school.
Compartmentalized.
Yeah, compartmentalized. Seriously. So, okay, what is this story? It's got this opening where some dude that looks like Gandalf and some guy that's looks like a stretched Frodo, but then everybody looks stretched, is hunting in the woods, and the wizard looking dude is like, you know what, this is a unicorn forest, we're not going to find any game here, because unicorns protect the forest, so they'll stop us from hunting. And it's, again, one of those things where there's no lore buildup. It's very little. It's just like, unicorns are magic, and they're not going to let the animals get killed. And he drops a line to his companion about how there's only one unicorn left in the world, and the unicorn is like, who overhears it is like, what?
Yeah.
Wait,
what? Yeah.
I beg your pardon, sir. And she goes through this whole existential crisis. We don't see the unicorn talking. We just kind of overhear her thought processes. That happens a lot. And then this really annoying butterfly shows up.
Oh, God.
Yeah, Kieran was like, man, I'll have whatever the butterfly's having when we were watching it. Yeah. And I was like, make it 2, because I could use them myself. Yeah.
Yes, seriously.
That butterfly's got the DTs, I'm telling you, man. Or he's a really old butterfly, and ergo, maybe he's got dementia. I can't really tell.
Yeah, maybe he hung out with Keith Richards one too many nights.
I suspect the butterflies are meant to be annoying, because even the unicorn's like, all right, this is some nonsense.
You know what? You're not helping me.
And then the goddamn butterfly starts laying down some lore like he knows some shit. And I'm like, I mean, if I was a unicorn, I don't know that I'd believe anything coming out of this butterfly's mouth because he's not proving to be a very reliable narrator so far. So,
Hey, it's the only information she's got. And she's like, if you've got anything, constantly throughout the movie, the unicorn is like, if you know anything, let me know. Because I don't know anything. I've been hanging out in my forest, and apparently I'm the last unicorn. So what's up? And
She
the whole
wasn't
movie,
even supposed to be here today. Yeah. No.
yes. Yeah, so though she doesn't sound like Dante, she sounds like Mia Farrow, which means she sounds very nice. She sounds very nice, and we're instantly, on her side. And then, she wanders through, and the film does something really interesting where, there's this idea, which is like a folklore idea, that you can only see a unicorn if you believe in unicorns, or you've got the right spirit and the right frame of mind to see a unicorn is the only way you can see one. And the film makes it clear that just because you have the right frame of mind to see a unicorn doesn't mean you're the unicorn's friend.
Right.
And doesn't mean that you're a good person.
Right.
So having a certain magical, mystic frame of mind does not make you good, which would be the easy, obvious thing to do in a kid's movie. Is like, you have to have the right frame of mind, and all the muggles who can't see the unicorns are just bad forms of people. But there's a guy, the first guy she meets is not a bad person. He thinks it's a horse, and it's like, well, where do you belong? Come here,
Right.
I'll take you to the fair and we'll figure out who you belong to, silly horse. He's not acting out of malice. He does what anybody would have done if you see a wild horse, wandering through. It's like, you clearly belong to someone. I'm going to do the right thing.
And he's like, a mare? A mare?
How dare you, sir?
No, it's yeah, it was. I thought that was interesting. And we were watching the sort of the interview with Peter Beagle, like on the special features, and he was like, yeah, this is a theme in a lot of my work, which is people looking for things or not being able to see things such as they are, in front of them. And I thought that it was interesting that was like a component of his other work that he basically apparently added or, included in The Last Unicorn. I thought it was interesting. I also, like, just as an aside, I think there's some pretty complicated themes in this for like a children's movie.
Yeah.
I think that might actually be what where this film actually has a lot of value is sort of introducing children to some of these fairly complex concepts.
Yes, I'd agree with that. My two girls, who are 11 and 8, both liked it. The 11-year-old went so far as to say, I hope Disney never remakes this.
Yeah.
I hope Disney never touches this. And I'm like, wow, you got that all on your own? Because I'm not a guy who's like dumping on Disney at the family dinner table. Like, I keep, for a lot of things, I keep my opinions to myself so my kids can have their own opinions. But I do let some things out, and she may have picked up that for me. But otherwise, it was like, I hope Disney never touches. I was like, you're right, because they would ruin this. It would not have the same charm or the same feeling. Which is not to say that remakes cannot be done.
Oh,
because
for sure.
For Christmas, I got a nice Criterion Blu-ray of His Girl Friday, which is a remake of an earlier film that was a Broadway play, and it was a remake of an earlier film of a Broadway play, and they gender swapped one of the roles. One of the characters, but in the front page, which was the original film, both the main characters are men. For His Girl Friday, Howard Hawks made one of the characters a woman, and gave it a new title. It's basically the same story with a new title, and it wasn't a big deal at the time, but it was a successful reboot of what was for 1931 a successful film. So remakes are doable. You can get creative with remakes, but I don't know if I trust Disney now, man.
No. It's all about the almighty dollar sign now with them.
Yeah,
It might be double the musical song content, and I don't know if I could bear that.
it would be double the musical song contact, and it would all be like it would be like Trolls. It would all be music from Trolls. It would be that. It would just be like club music and dubstep and whatever there would be Spice Girls songs and that kind of thing. Justin Timberlake, whatever Justin Timberlake decides to put out next. That's what we would get. Anyway, we've wandered, but that's okay.
Well, not all who wander are lost.
That's true.
Actually, relatedly, on the musical tangent, this is definitely a film before the era of whatever formula they've worked out for children's films, where you have like set intervals before, or you go X, you can only go X number of minutes before you have another musical number. That is obviously not happening with this movie.
This movie is wildly chaotic, and I think that's one of its charms.
Oh, and it was hand animated too. Like you can, like even the stuff for like the interpolation, like with the boards where where it fakes parallax, so you can, it looks like motion as the or the fake panning of the animated frame. Like all of that was done by hand.
Sure. Yeah, this is the day where that was done. Like there's no computer animation in 1982. If you can't draw it, it doesn't get seen. So, where were we? We just got to the butterfly. Yeah. We just got to the butterfly.
Farmer in the field, him mistaking her for Mare and her indignation.
Right.
Which then leads us to the next part, Mama Fortuna.
Mama Fortuna, who looks like a goblin. Yep. And her helpmate looks like a goblin. And I think while watching it, I was like, are they just like orcs now? Is what It's fine. It's fine. Who is an example of a character who knows she's dealing with a unicorn, who can see the unicorn, who has the mindset to see a unicorn, but she's not a nice person at all.
No.
She's a bad person who's captured a harpy, but again, they give her the most interesting motivation for what she's done, which is immortality.
Yes.
The unicorn's like, that harpy's going to escape and kill you one day. She's like, yep, that's totally going to happen. And when she does, I will always be remembered because, this is an immortal creature that doesn't die. So she will always remember me as the being that caged her. And therefore I will never die. And I thought that was cool.
A very interesting angle to have an antagonist who seeks immortality, but not through literally living forever, but through the only means which one can practically achieve immortality,
Yes. Immortality through remembrance, the only real immortality available to a human, which is biblical, almost. It's biblical. Like throughout the Old Testament, the theme of remembrance and the passing of down of tradition is how you live on. You live on in your offspring and your legacy. So, yeah. So those are some really interesting, and they're not real main antagonists of the story. They just kind of show up and they're dispensed with because, spoilers, the harpy escapes. The unicorn sets her free, even though she knows she probably shouldn't, because the harpy is a very hostile creature. But she knows what she's doing, and the harpy just dispenses justice and flies away. And that's the end of that encounter with those characters. They never come back, which is great. It gives it a nice questy feel to it. Like we're moving through points and then we move on, and we collect characters as we go. So we've got a real hunting party by the end.
And speaking of this, during this point, we meet Smendrick, who is at best one might call a hedge mage.
Yeah. I wish he had a different name. I hate the name. And it's from the novel. Like, Peter Beagle wrote that character with that name, so he has a reason for it, but I hate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Smendrick proves early on to be a seeker of magic to the extent that he must help the unicorn because this is this one example of really true magic he's seen in his life. And he
Mhm.
can think of no better thing to do than risk his life and just help her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a good guy, Schmendrick. I like him. He's a stand-up guy. He does his best with what he's doing. He's trying to do the right thing, and he does the right thing. And he gets a bunch of crap for it 90% of the time. So I'm on his side. I just wish his name was something other than Schmendrick.
Mendrick the Magnificent.
Yeah.
And I remember the one thing that the unicorn says to him when they're escaping from the harpy, and that's never run from anything immortal. It gets their attention.
Yeah, that was a good line. I like that. There's a lot of good lines in this. There's a lot of things that you haven't seen a million times before. Character interactions that are really that are simple and yet, kind of as you said, profound. Like there's
Yeah.
layers underneath all these things. Like is Schmendrick pathetic? Not really. He can do stuff. He's not like he's not a coward. He's not as good as he wants to be, and he's working on it. And the magic is really kind of out of his hands, but he's not pathetic. He's likable. I'm on his side.
One, and as we move through the story with him, his ability to sort of, I wouldn't say do magic, but to unleash magic and have it
Yes.
do its own thing is like
Literally.
grows exponentially, like as throughout the story, and it also sort of corresponds to his growth as a character, which is not coincidental.
No, not at all.
But I thought it was interesting. You had the juxtaposition with the next group of people they meet, who are sort of these, outlaws, these sort of highway robbers, sort of modeled on, the concept of Robin Hood, if you will.
Don't say that name.
but they're actually kind of crappy and not as good as Robin Hood.
They're not legendary. They're not exciting, and they know that they're not legendary. They're just kind of some bums from a village who decided to do this, and they're not that interesting. And their captain wants to be interesting but isn't.
Yeah.
And they're not terribly antagonistic, all things considered.
No.
Like they're like, yeah, they capture Schmendrick, but like first thing they offer him is what little portable food they have made from a thrice boiled rat. So
yeah, they're good guys. And you can tell that the way the movie tells you that Captain Cully is not what he pretends to be is he's short.
Yeah.
He's just a little. He looks like a hobbit. He's got this wonderful voice, and he's commanding, and he sounds like a noble robber rogue, and he's 4 feet tall.
Yeah,
and spherical. Let's not forget spherical.
Yep.
Highly spherical.
Which is one of those things that you like when you see it as a kid. You're like, why isn't he like a cool like rogue? And this is lame. And only later can you like enjoy it for what it is.
Yep.
And then Schmendrick, I don't know if it was accidentally or entirely intentional, tears up an illusion of the real Robin Hood,
right?
And all that, and like you see the juxtaposition between the reality of these, highway robbers and the, cinematic merry men, and like just the visual juxtaposition. You're like, yeah,
Nope.
yeah,
yeah. This movie seems to be a lot about like what you want to see. What do you want to see? What do you want to behold? Because that seems to be where Schmendrick can actually work his magic, and that gets right into like the actual villain of the story's motivation for things.
Yes.
But, and the power of beholding a unicorn, just seeing one, is kind of what the movie very very intelligently puts us at the center, at the heart of it, because it's it's the last unicorn.
Yep.
To call it that is to ask the question: do you get to see a unicorn? And The next character we add to our hunting party is questing party, like to our D&D dungeon crawl, is Molly, who bursts into tears when she sees a unicorn, because you're supposed to see a unicorn when you're a young maiden, and she's old now, and she's mad at the unicorn. She's mad at the unicorn, but she loves the unicorn. It's this deeply felt, weird emotional reaction that also makes sense.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, and I think that particular moment where she sees the unicorn is sort of, it's a unique sequence in sort of children's cinema, because I can't think of any other instances off the top of my head where you, in a kid's film, where you have somebody that's waited their whole life to see something in particular, and then they finally see it and they get mad
Yeah,
because it's not when they wanted it.
yeah.
They're like, why now?
Why now?
And
This doesn't do anything for me now.
and I feel like,
it does.
but it does. It ultimately does, and she ends up having the whole arc that she wanted to have when she was a younger woman, after she sees the unicorn. But I like that sequence because I think it's certainly something that's relatable to adults, but then I also think that it's something that you do see in, film for adults, and in older stories, where it's like, okay, well, you finally got the thing that you were looking for, but it's been 30 years, man. It's like you're not a young person anymore doing whatever it is or seeing whatever it is, but you did it.
It reminds me of Tolkien in the Silmarillion, in the story of Hurin, who is captured by Morgoth and spends his entire adult life, and his children are destroyed as a result because they grow up without a dad, and he finally escapes after his children Turin and what's her name are destroyed, and he finally finds his wife, who he hasn't seen in decades, and she says, she's not angry, she doesn't yell at him, but there's a sense of, you're too late. And he says, I know, I came as fast as I could. And she says, it doesn't make a difference. And then she dies. And it's the saddest thing that ever happened, because the Silmarillion is such a horribly sad story. And that's why they can't possibly make a movie of it, because there's just no winning. No one wins in the Silmarillion, which is why all critics of Tolkien are wrong. All of them.
The Silmarillion's a lot about how hubris is going to lay your ass low.
Yeah. Someday Eru is going to cut you down.
Yeah, the redemption comes later. We already wrote about that. This is how things were. This is how things were complete crap leading up to that. Yeah.
Is a bitter old elf queen. All right, this is this is why he was so done with this shit with Isildur.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you should have, Elrond. Too bad about that. Yeah.
I pushed that fuck into the volcano.
Yeah, maybe.
Hey, Elrond, I got a little rhyme for you. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Oh, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, no.
You know what? They're family. He couldn't do it. They're family.
Yeah, I know.
Nah, couldn't do it. Anyway, where are we now? We've got Molly, we've got Schmendrick, and then they're going to King Haggard's.
Well, can we take a moment before we get to that to appreciate Angela Lansbury's vocal role in this as the tree?
Oh, Jesus.
Schmendrick ended up engaged to, only it wasn't coniferous tree. It was a, what's the other word? Deciduous or something like that. Deciduous. Yes, apparently Schmendrick can't tell deciduous from coniferous, which is really some kind of maybe oak.
Well, I don't know. Did she do the tree and the Mommy Fortuna's voice? Because I know she did Mommy Fortuna's voice too.
I thought she was the tree. Oh, maybe the tree was someone else.
Might have done the tree. She might have been the tree as well. Like,
And I thought to myself, wow, I completely forgot about the tree titties.
You
there
know
was
what?
that.
Shame on me for forgetting about that because we're watching the little troll guy, rope Schmendrick to that tree, and I forget which one of my daughters said it, but they looked at the tree and they said, "That looks like a butt," and the other one said, "That does look like a butt." Dad, why does a tree look like a butt? I don't know, girls. This is further than I ever got into it before. And then the tree wakes up and it's not a butt, it's a bosom. And then it's just one of the weirdest things we've ever seen.
I'd
And when it
forgotten about
was
that sequence. Yeah.
and when it was over, my daughter, my 11-year-old, looked at me and said, "Well, Daddy, you'll have something to talk about on your podcast." And that is
I had forgotten about the tree titties, man. Shit, I probably should give Andrew a warning about that. He's watching with his kids. That loves me now.
it's fine. It was a G-rated film. Even judging that by 1982 standards, it's fine.
Something I don't recall from when I saw it as a kid.
It doesn't add anything particular to the story. It's just this weird thing the story decides to throw in your path just to I don't know, just to let you know that there's magic everywhere, I guess. So, don't question it. Just weird stuff is going to keep happening. And be okay with it.
Yeah, but I'd forgotten about the tree, and the interesting thing is that the outlaws are on the very outskirts of King Haggard's land.
Yes.
And there was never a more appropriately named king in all of fiction.
Yeah.
King Haggard, that hits it right on the nose.
It's so on the nose that you find yourself wondering why he did that. And apparently, and I'm looking at the Wikipedia now, Beagle said the name Haggard is based on the actual word. It's a particular look, but on the other hand, it's also a falconer's term. It's what you call an undomesticated hawk, a bird that knows the rudiments but is not reliable. If you fly a haggard, you might never see it again. It might go back to the wild.
Okay.
So there's something else going on there. He looks haggard, and he's voiced by Christopher Lee, which is just
Beautiful.
He did a great job, but he always kills it.
He always does. And but there's also a sense of he's not just this villainous character, this old gray character. He's also, there's something wild in him.
And sad.
Wild and sad, yes. And the best part of that is when they arrive at the castle and they're like, "We're here to see King Haggard." You know what? We've forgotten about turning the unicorn into a girl.
Oh, yeah.
We've completely skipped over that bit when they meet the Red Bull.
So the Red Bull, which has not given no one no wings at this point.
We
None
kept
whatsoever.
making that joke all night long. Were you guys making that joke?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I literally just couldn't stop. It's like that's the most effective marketing campaign in the 21st century. It's like Red Bull wings, we couldn't stop. And but anyway,
has fangs. I'm like, oh wow, that is not your standard herbivore right there.
No. And he's chasing the unicorn, and the only thing we know, the only useful information that the butterfly gave us, is that all the unicorns went away because they were being chased by the Red Bull. We don't know what the Red Bull is. The butterfly doesn't say. He flits off. He's given us that one piece of information, which is all the information that we need, because we see the Red Bull, and it looks like a Balrog. It's a creature of shadow and flame and red and horror, and it has fangs, and it's going to eat the unicorn, presumably. But really, it's just chasing it around, and Molly tells Schmendrick to do something, and Schmendrick does something. He's just, magic, do a thing, and she turns into a girl. Yep. And Molly gets mad at him. It's like, what do you want? I solved the problem. We'll deal with this later.
What I thought was funny was we don't actually get a name for the unicorn until she becomes a human.
Right.
Because they refer to her as the Lady Almalthea, and then afterwards she's referred to as Almalthea, but like prior to that point in the story, she's just the unicorn. Like, we literally don't have a name for the ostensibly the protagonist in this story, which I thought was a very rewatching it this time, I was like, oh yeah, we literally don't have a name for her until this point.
She has no identity. She has no identity until she becomes a human, and it's just a name that Schmendrick like pulls out of his hat because the guy asks him like, "Who are you?" The guards at the gates of Haggard's castle, and he's like, "Ah, her name is Thea Cleophas, the lady." Blah, 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 blah.
And the interesting part of this is when he turns the unicorn into Althea. This is the point where Schmendrick finally grasps the truth of his magic, which is he is not the controller of the magic. He is merely a conduit.
Mm-hmm.
He is the form through which magic works its will. Hence why he finally says, "Magic, do what you will."
Yeah, then it works.
Its greatest task, transforming an immortal creature into a mortal one.
Yeah. Right. In such a way so that she almost, she dwells in that for a while and almost wants to hold on to it. Does want to hold on to it, but is not able to.
Well, and there was a thing with this, and it becomes a plot point in the film where they're like, she can only stay human for so long before she effectively goes native and forgets that she's a unicorn and like cannot be changed back. And I thought that was a very, I thought that was an interesting point, and I've definitely seen that come up in other works of fiction where people are turned into animals or vice versa. And there's a lot of like, well, okay, this has a time limit because if you stay in this other form for too long, you're going to forget that you came from this other place, and you will continue to be this thing. And that's I thought that was just like a fantasy trope, but it's actually something that comes up a lot, like that actually originates in myth. And from a lot of cultures around the world. So I thought that was a very interesting touch to include.
We all eventually become what we're pretending to be. That's just a truth of psychology. So it doesn't surprise me that that's found in myth, because good myths contain sacred truths, and good fantasy borrows heavily from myth.
I feel like this story, the way that's written, takes more from like the original root folklore tales that the brothers Grimm, put to paper, the oral tradition, than it does like your standard cleaned up fairy tale.